Ambojiva rasagraha Rupamatrat vikurvanat Tejaso daivachoritat Rasamatram abhutasmat Ambojiva rasagraha. Marjis. Rupamatrat vikurvanat Deso daivachoditat Rasamatram abhutasmat Ambojiva rasagraha. Rupamatrat, which evolves from the subtle element form. Vikurvanat, undergoing transformation. Tejasaha, from fire. Daivachoditat, under a superior arrangement. Rasamatram, the subtle element taste. Abhut, become manifested. Tasmat, from that. Ambaha, water. Jiva, the sense of taste. Rasagraha, which perceives taste. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. By the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue, which perceives taste, is also manifested. Please repeat after me. By the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue, which perceives taste, is also manifested. Purport. The tongue is described here as the instrument for acquiring knowledge of taste. Because taste is a product of water, there is always saliva on the tongue. Kashaya madurasti tiktam katva amala iti naikadam bhautikanam vikarena rasa eko vividyate. Translation. Although originally one taste becomes manifold as astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour and salty due to contact with other substance. Kledanam pindanam triptihi prana payayona danam tapa panodo bhuyastvam ambasa vrityastva imaham. Translation. The characteristics of water are exhibited by its moistening other substance, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing by slacking thirst. Purport. Starvation can be mitigated by drinking water. It is sometimes found that if a person who has taken a vow to fast takes a little water at intervals, the exhaustion of fasting is at once mitigated. In the Vedas, it is also stated, Apomaya pranaha. Life depends on water. With water, anything can be moistened or dampened. Flour dough can be prepared with a mixture of water. Mud is made by mixing earth with water. As stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, water is the cementing ingredient of different material elements. If we build a house, water is actually the constituent in making the bricks. Fire, water, air are the exchanging elements for the entire material manifestation. But water is most prominent. Also, excessive heat can be reduced simply by pouring water on the heated field. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Dapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajadam Sahagana Raghunathan Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vidam Cha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Bhashyate Teshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhupyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratikse Namah Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusde Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Kam karoti vatsalam pangolangayate giringat kripatamaha vandeshi gurun chintari dinatarinam. Tavasmi na jivamita vignayati vigyadevi mam charantikam. Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning's Bhagavatam class, chapter Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. The subject matter is quite technical. Gives a description of how subtle element and gross elements are formed. Considering the complexity of the topic, I will take the liberty to just describe from the beginning so that I can also refresh my memory. And if there's any scholars in the class, just correct me if I'm if I'm wrong. So the first element created is, first element which is in existence is Pradhan, and Pradhan is existing eternally. So Pradhan can be understood as like a template which Krishna uses to generate the material universes. If anybody is an accountant, you can say, is anybody any accountants here? Chartered accountants? No? If you go and ask the accountant, want to open a company, if it is a stock standard, they'll just say, we'll just take a company from the shelf. So it's a company which is set up with all minimal requirements, and then they just can put your name on it, and then you can start using it. Similarly, Pradhan is an eternally existing element, what Krishna uses to reproduce the material world. So this Pradhan is a homogeneous element where all the 24 elements are present in it in a homogeneous state. It's not manifested yet. It's just all in homogeneous state. All the, what is that? The five knowledge acquiring, the five gross elements, the four internal senses, the five external senses, the karmendriyas, gyanendriyas, the 24 elements, they're all present in this homogeneous state. So that's called pradhan, the beginning of the material universe. And this pradhan, Krishna introduces himself into pradhan as time. So that's a catalyst. He introduces himself into it, kala. And then he impregnates pradhan with the internal energy or the jivas. It's like an egg, the unfertilized egg. It just doesn't do, nothing happens in an unfertilized egg. It's just in a static state. But as soon as the egg is impregnated, things start moving. And for the things start moving, the catalyst is time. So Krishna himself is the catalyst. He enters the unfertilized egg or pradhan, and then the living entities are injected, fertilized. And as soon as the living entities enter, the time factor catalyze, start the catalytic process, then the manifestations happen. Things starts moving. And when this thing starts moving, it's called mahatattva. When there's agitation, that's called mahatattva. And this mahatattva, what happens there? So the mahatattva, the first thing which manifests in mahatattva is shuddha tattva, shuddha sattva, or the pure goodness. The pure goodness. And that state is referred as Vasudeva state. There's no contamination there. Everything is quite sober in this agitated form. So that's the Shuddha Sattva. And from this Shuddha Sattva, the next manifestation is Ahankar, or ego. And this ego is still not in a contaminated state. It's still in a pure state. It's called Ahankar. To explain it, how do we explain it? We can explain it like all the elements are there, but they haven't been assigned. They haven't had their assignment yet. It's like a box of sardines. Maybe I'll use a more kosher example. Like a box of tomatoes. In the box of tomatoes, there is plenty of tomatoes there, but the individuality of the tomato is not established yet. We all know there's individual tomatoes there, but it's referred as box of tomatoes. There is no distinction. All the tomatoes are visualized in same, even though they are different. So that's the, and that state is called Sankarshan state, where the Ahankar hasn't been assigned to living entities. They are in a unrecognized state, or unrecognized, or not designated state. They are not designated as individuals yet. So that's the Ahankar or Sankarshan state. So this Ahankar or Sankarshan state, when living entities in it start recognizing themselves through karta aham manyate, like considering themselves the doer. When they start thinking that I'm the doer, then the ego becomes false ego. So the box of tomatoes becomes individual tomatoes. And the individual characteristic manifest based on their association with the three modes of material nature, which is more of goodness, more of passion, and more of ignorance. In the beginning we saw Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness. Here the goodness is contaminated or is mixed up with Traigunya, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhava Arjuna. So Arjuna, rise above this contaminated three modes to only goodness. Just get rid of the passion and ignorance. Just situate yourself just in goodness. So the living entities in this state chooses to associate themselves with the three modes of material nature, and from that, when they associate with goodness, or when the ego or the false ego associate with goodness, evolves the mind. Evolves the mind. And what the mind does, the mind is, mind's duty is to desire. It desires. So when the living entity or when the ego gets involved with goodness, it wants to desire. I want this, I want that. And that is conceived, or that is perceived through mind. So the mind is created. And then what happens? Then if the ego associates with passion, comes the senses. The intelligence. Comes the intelligence. So if you desire something, then you need to achieve it. You want milk sweets in the morning. You desire the milk sweets. So you need to achieve it. So that you have to use your intelligence. So what is the intelligence stating? Oh, I have to, just after Mangalarati song finishes, I'm going to immediately duck out to the kitchen before nobody comes so I can take it. Now that's the intelligence dictating how to achieve your desire. And that is done through, and this intelligence works through two sets of senses. Knowledge acquiring senses and physical senses. That is Jnanendriya and Karmendriya. Again, going back to the milk sweets example. You desire, the mind desires, the intelligence gives you how to do it, and the Jnanendriyas will give you all the necessary information to achieve that goal. I have to get out, I can see the pujari has walked out, so it means the sweet should be there. So it gives you all the necessary intelligence to acquire that object. Or it is 4:30, prasadam should, or 5 o'clock, it should be out. So it gives you all that intelligence to achieve it. That's the Jnanendriyas. And the Karmendriyas are, which makes you physically go and get it. So you have your legs and hand, you run, get the sweets. That's the Karmendriyas. So the intelligence manifests itself into Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas, and they help you achieve the desire which is manifested through mind. So that is mode of goodness, and association of ego with mode of goodness, and then association of ego with mode of passion. And then the last one is ignorance. So when the ego, when the false ego is contaminated or is influenced by mode of ignorance, that is exhibited through sex desire. And the sex desire becomes the reason for further manifestation of other elements. So goodness and false ego gives you mind, Aniruddha state. False ego with passion gives intelligence, and then false ego with ignorance manifested through sex desire. The gross elements starts manifesting. The gross elements are, the first one is sound. And for the sound, it has to have space. Sound travels through space. So sound and space becomes manifested, ethereal space. By space, then we start putting boundaries around space. Then we know it's, space is like, space outside, space inside, space inside an object. So the space starts manifesting. And sound is the medium. Sound is what propagates through the medium, and the medium is space. There's a lot of technical things. If you want me to slow down, I will. But yeah, so we are here till water, so I will just go through till water, and then if you guys want me to slow down and repeat, I'm happy to do it. From sound and space, the next manifestation is air and form. Air and touch. Air and touch, excuse me. So the space can't remain empty. It has to be filled with something. The vacuum doesn't exist. As soon as there's vacuum, the air enters. It's hard to maintain vacuum. So the next element or the next state is air enters. And what is the manifestation of air? Air manifests as touch. You can't feel the space, but we can feel the air in the space by touch. You can feel. Now there's a hot air blowing, then you can feel heat, touch of heat. And then if there's a cold air blowing, you can feel cold. So air and touch manifest. From air and touch comes fire and form or colors. So if there's just heat emanating from an object, there is no form. But as soon as you can see the fire behind the heat, then you can see the form. Fire has a form. So the visual aid comes in. So from the touch, you go to the sight. Through eyes, the fire illuminates the eyes, and through the help of fire, we are able to see various forms and various colors. And before this, before the fire and form, there's no sensibility of seeing. There's no, you can't see. You just by feel. So that is the third state. And the fourth state is from the fire and visual form comes taste and water. Taste and water comes, and that's what we are discussing now. The taste and water, the feeling of taste, and the element water comes. Okay, and Prabhupada in 43 explains about the various qualities of water, what water can do. First thing is water sustains. Without water, there's no sustenance. A person can, if he doesn't eat food for a long time, he could still survive. But if he stops drinking water, his survival immediately becomes reduced. So the water helps sustenance. And also the water gives taste. In Bhagavad Gita 7.8, Rasoham apsukaunteya prabhasmi shashishuriyo pranava sarva vedeshu shabdike paurisham nishu. So Krishna says, Rasoham apsukaunteya. In the taste in the water is me. And so because of the water, we get taste. And not only taste, we also get satisfaction. The concept of satisfaction comes, material satisfaction, comes because of the introduction of water. For example, you have a big meal. There's a lot of dry preparation, there is rice and sabji and whatever. But you may eat all of them, but unless there is something liquidy to go with it, you can't feel satisfied. So that's why you drink water or drink some tea, something to go with the food, and that adding the element of liquid or water into your meal gives you that satisfaction. Because the satisfaction is Krishna himself. The taste within water is satisfaction, and that water or the liquid gives the concept of satisfaction to a living entity. So this is the fourth state of manifestation. fourth gross state of manifestation, and the next one is earth and smell, which will be discussed by the future speakers. So that's how, from starting from pradhan to the last second gross subtle element of taste and water is described. As I mentioned, I did rush through. If you have any clarifications, ask me before I jump into next topic. Sorry, what? Ego mixes with goodness, gives you mind. Ego mixes, false ego mixing with mode of goodness gives you mind, and the mind gives you, or through mind you start desiring. Okay. All right. So we saw how these elements manifest. Okay. The natural question one might ask is, this is Bhagavatam, why Bhagavatam is supposed to describe the pastimes of the Lord? He's dancing with the gopis, or he's playing with Mother Yashoda, is playing with the cowherd boys. That's what naturally Bhagavatam, people have the expectation that Bhagavatam describes that. But why here Kapila Dev, incarnation of God himself, goes so much into detail about how these elements are broken down, how these elements come together and form various states and various other gross elements. Why? What's the need for presenting this? So Prabhupada, speaking on these verses, explains that to understand Krishna, one should not just partially look at his pastimes. One should understand them in full. What is that verse in Bhagavad Gita? Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tattvataha. Krishna says, to not take birth in this material world, one should understand my janma, my birth, how I take birth in this material world, my activities and my pastimes in tattva. So he uses the word tattva. What is the meaning of the word tattva then? Tattva means knowing things in full, not in partial. If you take a topic, one has to, if you want to be an expert, one has to know all the facets of that particular topic. So in this verse, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, Krishna says one should understand me, or one should understand Krishna. So how? Through all his facets, through all complete knowledge of him, as much as the living entities can assimilate. So the complete knowledge. So it should be tattva. What is it? Bhagavatam, chapter 1, text 12, 10. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. The goal of the living entities taking the material world, taking birth in this material world, is to understand tattva jigyasa. So one should understand the tattva. What tattva? Ultimately, tattva of Krishna, which is Janma Karma Chame Divyam, understanding him in full. And before understanding him in full, we have to understand who we are. So Jiva Tattva. And the Jiva Tattva is explained in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The text starting from number 12, second chapter. Krishna goes all the way till text 30. In these verses, from 12 to 30 of second chapter, he explains everything to do with the jiva, to the living entity of the soul. He doesn't give any slack. Every point of view he describes in detail. How jiva is not naham chindanti shastrani, or avinashi tu tadvidhi, achalayam sanatanam. So every facet he covers. So to understand a topic, to be an expert in a topic, one has to understand everything about that topic. Not just, I want to know about this person, so I'm just going to have a limited view of my engagement or what I'm trying to get out of him. That's not understanding a topic. So, to understand Krishna is to understand how he acts as well, how he creates this material world, how he destroys this material world. So, these topics of how Krishna, through his various energies, creates this material world is explained. So to understand Krishna, one has to also try to understand all these topics. Yeah? So one can't just say, oh, these topics are quite technical. It talks about, it's like, a chemistry class, an atom of uranium, when it is in a stable state, it's bombarded with an electron, then it explodes, and other elements are formed. It's very similar sounding. Pradhan in a stable state is bombarded by time, and then it expands. This is not generally what people expect to hear from Bhagavad Gita. But any bona fide scripture, like Vishnu Purana, Bhagavatam, dives into detail of this chemistry of how Krishna generates and creates and things like that. Why? Why? Because Krishna's activities are transcendental, and our intelligence is very limited, and we are on top of it contaminated by three modes of material nature, especially ignorance. So what happens when we jump into Krishna's pastimes of involving intimacy? One might, out of his envy, might start, because of envy, one might start becoming envious of Krishna. Or out of foolishness, start imitating Krishna. So either one becomes an envious person or one becomes a sahajya. If one directly dives just into the direct pastimes of the Lord, not understanding his other facets. Now you can see how complex is it. This topic, I've read this so many times, and if you just wake me up from bed and ask me, I would forget, because it's just quite complex. And Krishna does it day in and day out. And not on top of it, this is just conceptual study. It's not even come into practical. Practical is the universe is coming out of him. From the universes, he enters again in them as Garbhodaya Sai Vishnu, then Shirogoda Sai Vishnu. It doesn't even, we are just understanding the concept, high-level conceptual view of the material world created. And it's so complex. So having this in-depth knowledge of Krishna's ability to create. So one, if and when somebody reads about the intimate pastimes of Krishna, they don't take him for cheap. They don't take him as a little boy who just performs frivolous activities in the forest of Vrindavan, like what happened to Brahma or Indra. Even though they are learned, they still got bewildered. They saw Krishna and then they thought he's just an ordinary boy. So from preventing that from happening to us, of us becoming envious of him. Krishna married 16,800, 108 wives. Naturally, a person not knowing him, if he thinks he's just an ordinary person, they'll become envy and they'll say, oh, Krishna is just a lusty guy. Even in reality, Krishna, contextually speaking, he married only 16,108 girls. But we living entities have millions and millions of partners. We never bring that up. We had millions of wives. We've been here for unlimited, for long time. And every time we take birth, we have one or two or three, many partners. And nobody talks about that. Out of envy, they immediately pounce on Krishna and then belittle him and think that he's just a lusty boy because he married 16,000 odd girls. So to prevent one from becoming envious, because Krishna is not ordinary person, and knowing his pastimes in detail like this, puts him in his place for us to understand and not take him through envious view. And similarly, the other side of envy is sahajaism, where not having good knowledge of the scriptures, one starts imitating Krishna or taking Krishna for as cheap. And that becomes sahajaism, where then you start relating to Krishna in a very take it easy manner, without the respect, with the awe and reverence what Krishna deserves, not knowing him who he is. So, for example, if you don't know the person standing next to you is a prime minister, you'll just have a very casual conversation with him, a mundane conversation with him, not recognizing his powers. But as soon as you recognize he's a prime minister, your way you deal with him changes. Immediately become much more respectful. Same thing. Without having the understanding of the scriptures, all this detailed breakdown of how things work, if one starts relating with Krishna, they will start, one relates with Krishna in a casual, offensive way, not recognizing him. Of course, it's allowed in a very elevated state, but we are not in that elevated state. We are in a contaminated state. And in a contaminated state, we start taking Krishna into, taking him for granted. Then you start dressing him in like Santa Claus, or I saw a photo recently on Facebook where somebody put penny loafers in his feet. So you start dealing with him as if you're dealing with your child, or your toy. Not forgetting that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then awe and reverence required to worship him, to approach him. So it protects us from falling down into the trap of being sahaja, and also from becoming envious. So that's why the scriptures dive into very detailed of how Krishna manifests his power, how he creates material universes, how he maintains them, how much technicality is required to what he does. So to have that tattva realization of Krishna. Excuse me, these topics are discussed. All right, today is, I will stop there and then I will move on to the next topic. Is there any questions pertaining to this before I jump into the next topic? Okay. And we will have a question and answer time later. Today is also the disappearance day of Vrindavan Das Thakur. Vrindavan Das Thakur, famous, has written a very famous book called Chaitanya Bhagavat. So the first verse, I would like to repeat the first verse. It's quite nice. Ajana lambita bhujau kanakabatado sankirtana ikapitaro kamalaya daksho vishwambaro dijavaro yugadharma phalo vande jagat priyakaro karunavatado. This is the first verse of Chaitanya Bhagavat, written by Vrindavan Das Thakur. So in this verse, Vrindavan Das Thakur glorifies both Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. So what he says, Ajana lambita bhujau. So Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they have their physical form where their arms are so long that they touch their knees. So according to Samundrika Lakshana, or the definition of beauty, there's a book which defines what a beauty is. In that, it says if a person has their arm touching their knees when they are standing up, it's considered to be beautiful. And to have a long arm, it's considered to be beautiful. So here, both Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they both have this feature where their arm touches their knees, all the way come to their knees. So they have a very long arm. So, Ajana Lambita Bhujau, Kanakavatado. And Kanakavatar means their body, both of them, their body, Kanakavataro, plural here, is used. So it means both Lord Nityananda and Chaitanya, their body is of golden complexion. Their complexion is golden in color. And then Vrindavan Das Thakur goes on explaining Sankirtanaika Pitaro. Pitaro means father. He is a father, they are the fathers of the Sankirtan movement. They commenced or they started the Sankirtan movement. And then Kamalaya Daksha. Their eyes are like lotus petal. Their eyes are like lotus petal. So where am I? Ajana Lambita Bhujao, Kanakavatado, Sankirtanaika Pitaro, Kamalaya Daksho, Vishwambaro, Dvijavaro. Vishwambaro, again plural. It means both Chaitanya and Nityananda are the maintainer of all living entities. Vishwambaro, Dvijavaro. And Dvijavaro means, and they are both best of the Brahmanas. They both took birth in a Brahmin family. And they are not just any ordinary Brahmanas, they are best among all the Brahmanas. Dvijavaro. Vishwambaro, Dvijavaro. Yuga Dharma Phalo. And what they have done, they have protected the Yuga Dharma for this age. And what is that? Or protected or propagated the Yuga Dharma for this age. And that is the Sankirtan moment, which is chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunavataro. And so he says, I offer my respectful obeisances to Jagat Priya. Jagat Priya means the sustainer of the universe, of all the universes. And not only that, Karuna Avatado. They are the most magnanimous, or the most magnanimous of all incarnations. Of all incarnations Krishna has incarnated, they are considered the most magnanimous. So that's a prayer. Vrindavan Das Thakur teaches us from the first verse of Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's a very nice verse to remember. When we pray to Mahaprabhu and Nityananda, we can reflect their position, their physical beauty, what they have come to achieve, how magnanimous they are. It covers all the elements. So Vrindavan Das Thakur was a posthumous child to his mother. In the sense, his father passed away when he was still pregnant, when he was still in the womb of his mother. And his mother is not an ordinary person. His mother is Narayani Devi. Narayani Devi is the niece of Srivas Pandit, Srivas Acharya. She's the niece. So she had the good fortune to associate with Mahaprabhu when she was a very young child, because Mahaprabhu spent most of his time in Srivas Angan, in Srivas's house. And this little child happened to, being a niece of Srivas Thakur, happened to be there. And there were instances where Mahaprabhu gave his whole plate of prasadam. After he finished eating, he gave the whole plate to Narayani. And she had the good fortune to have Mahaprabhu's direct remnants. And that's Narayani Devi. And of course, when she had Vrindavan Das Thakur without a father, father passed away, she spent most of her time with Vrindavan Das Thakur in her grandfather's house, Vasudeva Datta's house, which is across from Jalangi in Mamgachi. So if you go to Mayapur, across the Ganges, there is Swarupganj, and there is Mamgachi. It's a place where Mahaprabhu planted a mango tree. So that's where Vrindavan Das Thakur grew under the guidance of Vasudeva Datta. So when Vrindavan Das Thakur was 4 years old, Mahaprabhu took sannyas and left Mayapur. So it naturally means when he was 20 years old, Mahaprabhu left the planet. So he was quite young when Mahaprabhu left the planet. So Vrindavan Das Thakur took initiation from Nityananda Prabhu, and he was considered the last disciple of Nityananda Prabhu. So that's the last person Nityananda Prabhu initiated, and also he commissioned Vrindavan Das Thakur to write the pastimes of Mahaprabhu. So he wrote the book called Chaitanya Mangala, which captures especially exemplify or elaborates the childhood pastimes of Mahaprabhu, the youth childhood pastimes of Mahaprabhu is captured. So when you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj always refers, the childhood pastimes, these are elaborated by Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat book. But so it's captured in very detail in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Mahaprabhu's early pastimes. So when Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote this book, it was named Chaitanya Mangal. But eventually Lochan Das Thakur also wrote a book called Chaitanya Mangal. So they didn't want, the scholars in Vrindavan didn't want to have confusion, Chaitanya Mangal by Lochan Das Thakur and Chaitanya Mangal by Vrindavan Das Thakur. So what they did was they renamed Chaitanya Mangal written by Vrindavan Das Thakur to Chaitanya Bhagavat. Because the way it is written, the information written in Chaitanya Bhagavat, kind of, it's very similar to how Bhagavatam is written. Srimad Bhagavatam is written. So they renamed, and also the way Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote the book, he wrote it very similar to the style of Vyasadeva. So because of that similarity between Vrindavan Das Thakur and Vyasadeva's writings, then the book was renamed as Chaitanya Bhagavat. So today is the disappearance day of Vrindavan Das Thakur. So we can remember him and use his prayer, the one which I chanted, to glorify Mahaprabhu and Nityananda. All right, that's it. Any questions, comments? Yep.
Just wondering, does this principle apply to the entire material creation world, including how scientists are trying to go to Mars, Moon, and yesterday to Venus? But does this principle apply to all the planetary systems in the universe?
Yes. Yeah. These are the building blocks of the universe. And this is conceptually how the universes work. So water is required to sustain life. In other planets, there might be other elements more prominent. Like for example, in sun, the fire element is prominent. But just the prominence of the element. But when it comes to sustenance, it requires water, even for the living entities there. So the principle remains the same. Like here, we have earth, it's quite prominent, you can see earth, and water is not very accessible. It's salty inside most of the water. But still, for the sustenance, the water is required. Similarly, if you go higher, the subtler air or fire becomes prominent, but for sustenance water is required. And if you go to grosser, earth becomes more prominent, but you still need water. Say for example, you go to the desert, there's no water. There are living entities who live there, but purely dependent on what comes out of the earth. But still, the sustenance, they still have to have even a little bit of water. If you remove that water element, immediately there's no life. Does that make sense?
And what are these different layers we talk about? Fire, ether, each one is like 10 times more superlative. What is that one?
Yeah. So there's 5 layers, starting from ether, and then air, and then fire, and then water. No, the earth is around. The planetary systems where living entities are surviving is surrounded by these spheres. Yeah, and if a planet is situated in a fiery zone like sun, the fire element is prominent. If a planet or where the watery element is prominent, and in that planet,
So different planetary systems.
located in different, The more you go grosser, it becomes Earth, like where we are. And they are like 10, the bands are like 10 times, 10 factorials of each. So that's the covering of this material world. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Go Premanande. Prabhupada ki Jai. Sakal Patar Vishwa Kripa Sindhu Sapadidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Vaishnava.